I am pleased to be joined this hour by Shelby Steele. He is a senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution, the author of Shame, How America's Past Sins Have Polarized Our Country, and writer and narrator of the documentary What Killed Michael Brown. Shelby, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, I saw the film, and it was phenomenal. And before we get into a little more details of it, I want to know why you felt that this story was so important to tell.
Well, I think it captured where race relations are in America today probably better than any other story. That there are many stories, many situations where black has been shot by police and so forth, and where George Floyd is one of the more recent ones. There's a blow up, a kind of cultural. It becomes a cultural event as well as a political event. The whole country's attention is riveted for a while. Well, why is that? And it seemed to me that in struggling, looking at the Michael Brown story, and trying to answer that question of why is this? Become a kind of phenomenon in American life. Why? What are we trying to work out as a society? What keeps getting us in this, trapping us in this, these kinds of stories? So Michael Brown was just a perfect story for what, in terms of giving an opportunity to look at race in America.
Right, and I had Eli, your son, director of the film, on, and we talked about what we obviously know was a false narrative, that things were said and broadcast in the media that weren't true, and people bought it, and wanted to know why people reacted that way. And in the film, you coined a term, poetic truth, about it, which is just phenomenal. Can you explain that poetic truth?
Yes, the poetic truth is as opposed to objective truth, literal truth. Poetic truth is invented in order to win for you a certain leverage and power in society. If I say that Michael Brown was executed, then I'm invoking the whole history of racism in America, the violence, the ugliness, and so forth. And in doing that, in order to do that, I have to make up a truth, which is that Michael Brown was murdered, in a sense, killed by white racism in America. That becomes a distortion of what. Yes, Michael Brown was killed, but was he killed for those reasons? There is absolutely no evidence that he was. There were two Justice Department investigations, two grand jury investigations, an FBI investigation. In all of that, not one shred of evidence proved or indicated that racism played a role in Michael Brown's death. Yet, even to this very day, there are people, not just in Ferguson, but around the country, who believe that Michael Brown was a victim of white racism. That's a poetic truth because I'm trying to win in going with that truth. I'm trying to win leverage in American life. I'm trying to win to have power. And that truth makes me as a black innocent and makes whites guilty, and gives me the power to manipulate their guilt, and gives me a strength, a power in society that is enormous. This is the power that then transforms American institutions, changes the education system, changes even today corporations are interested in diversity and inclusion and so forth. Well, all of that social change and movement is verified, justified, if Michael Brown was killed out of systemic racism.
Right. Yeah.
On the other hand, if he wasn't killed out of that, then it becomes a corruption. So in that sense, truth facilitates a corruption. It tries to make power out of race, and it succeeds. In this case, it succeeded. Michael Brown brought enormous power to the left in America.
Definitely. I mean, I could obviously sit here and talk the whole hour just about the film, but I want to talk about some solutions and talk about this wonderful piece you recently wrote for the Wall Street Journal. So I'm going to jump around a bit. But I do want to get to this. I want to talk about, because no one talks about this. Whenever you do documentaries on true stories, it pulls you in and it's riveting. And you're like, I remember that story, and you watch. But nobody talks about, especially something as big as this was, like what happened when the cameras went away. Right. So everybody was there. People internationally came in with cameras. So this small town became the focal point of race and, what is permeating underneath in the country, and then they all go home. And what happens? So can you talk about some of the things that Ferguson were left with after this media firestorm?
Yeah, Ferguson was, well, for one thing, it was a town, a quiet little suburb, and a good bit of it was burned up. Just the physical damage. Business after business was lost. Of course, right away, the half of the police department was vanished. For the most part, they were let go, and of course, they were blamed as a part of this. They were seen as the persecutors of blacks, and so they lost who wants to really join the Ferguson, Missouri Police Department. So they're cut in half. Well, then crime doubles. You can't give speeding tickets anymore because then the cops are proving that they're racist. So it becomes, Ferguson now is a place where people cut through it because they'll never get a ticket for speeding. Crime rate is way up. Housing prices, of course, are way, way down. People have lost everything they've had simply because they were residents of Ferguson, and Ferguson was stigmatized. They couldn't sell their houses, they couldn't sell their businesses, so forth. So this town, utterly innocent, having done nothing, again, having to do with racism at all, has been shattered. And there are many, many brave people there who are trying to hold out, trying to rebuild. But that's going to be a very long and slow process, and hopefully they'll be able to get some help in doing that. It's one thing we hope the film will do. Will bring some attention to that particular locale. It's a truly American story there.
Yeah, and people don't understand that, like the impact that this has on just normal citizens. Like if you're white and you're from Ferguson, you're going to be painted a certain way. And don't want to give away the whole film, but you mentioned the thing about speeding through town, and that was really interesting because you talked about all of the investigations that proved that this was not based on racism, and the facts came out. We can go into the huge number of witnesses who saw what happened and discounted certain portions of what happened. But another thing came from it. So Obama sent Eric Holder there, and the DOJ did this investigation. And like you said, they found out that it was not based on racism, but it was such a big story. A lot of that stuff, people are moved by emotion. So he couldn't just leave and say nothing happened. So he had to find something. And so what Shelby was referencing is what they found was they treat blacks differently, and the one way to prove it is look at the number of tickets they give, and they pull drivers over. It disproportionately affects blacks, and that's unfair. So this proves that the whole police department and the city is racist. So we now need, even though they didn't kill Michael Brown because of racism, this is all racist, so something needs to be done about it. And so whenever people, especially government officials, get that we must do something in their minds, that something they do is never a true fix. So we're coming up to the break. So on the other side, I want to talk about that a little bit and then move back to something I think is probably the most important part of the film. We are talking with Shelby Steele, author and writer of the documentary What Killed Michael Brown. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
We return to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer. Once again, here's Charles Love.
Welcome back to the show. We're talking Ferguson and Michael Brown with Shelby Steele, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and writer of the documentary What Killed Michael Brown. And before the break, I asked about Eric Holder going to Ferguson to try to bring justice. Didn't find what the people wanted, the angry mob wanted him to find. And so he had to dig up something. And I wanted to let Shelby comment on that.
Yes. What's interesting is that the source of one of the great new sources of power in American life is the victimization of black people. If you can prove that black people were victimized somehow, then that bestows on you moral authority, moral power. And that has become, we haven't really recognized that yet fully in America, but that is an enormous power that affects our culture, our way of life, gives us things like political correctness and so forth. So when Obama sends Holder to Ferguson, he is looking for black victimization. That's power. That's juice. That is much bigger than anything that literally happens in Ferguson. That gives the president of the United States power, makes him more legitimate as a president. So there is this race as a means to power. So when Eric Holder goes there, he's going to find he wants to find victims and he wants to find racists. Then he's happy. Then he's got the sort of power that comes out of black victimization, and he can make his boss back in Washington happy. But that's how we have that dynamic today in America, where the victimization of black people just is such a tremendous source of moral power that there's a frenzy, a feeding frenzy that breaks out when George Floyd is killed, when Michael Brown is killed, when Trayvon Martin is killed, so forth, and so on. That's why these events make are so explosive. While at the same time, on the south side of Chicago and Philadelphia and New Orleans and St. Louis and other cities, tens of thousands of young black kids are killed on an ongoing basis, year in and year out. And they get no attention. Their deaths don't count because their deaths are not the result of white racism. If they were the result of white racism, they would be valued, be money in the bank. But without racism, who cares? There's no power.
Wow. So back to the film, I think watching it, what I came to my mind was that some of the most powerful parts of the film are you telling your story and going back and kind of developing your past and how you got where you were, or even questioning, am I wrong? Like, what's going on? When you're standing and you're looking out at the horizon and thinking about it, it was pretty powerful. But I also liked it because as a conservative, but I don't consider myself a member of a party. I'm just a logical guy, and what makes sense makes sense. It's like we believe there's no racism, and as an older statesman, you've experienced racism, but people look at you as an intellectual who's a conservative and says, well, that's because he's, what do they say? He's he's trying to gain favor from whites and all these other things they say, and they discount the fact that you've understand and you've lived it. And you talk in the film about your parents fighting for equality and your work in East St. Louis. And can you talk briefly about that?
Well, sure. I was born. My parents married in the civil rights movement. They were founding members of CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, which was the premier sort of civil rights organization for a long time in the 50s and 60s, 70s, so forth. Still around today. But so I grew up in that environment of this. My parents were always going on demonstrations and marches and organizing to create and to integrate a church, to change the school system. They organized a boycott at the school that I went to because it was segregated. So fighting for racial justice down on the ground in a real way was a part of my background, and this was again in the era of segregation in America. I grew up in a segregated America, so I know what it's like. I was in my 20s, 30s before I had any sense that segregation would end. I had to go to court to rent an apartment, so forth and so on. So when we talk about racial animus today, it's interesting to me how we come up with terms like systemic racism. And to me, that proves the fact that racism has really declined in America. I think the big story of race relations today in America is the fact that racism has so radically declined. I couldn't get a paper route when I was a kid because they said we can't have black boys riding their bikes through white neighborhoods at 6 o'clock in the morning. So you cannot be a paper boy. You cannot be a caddy on the golf course. You cannot be a dishwasher. We can't have people see you wash the dishes. I didn't think anything of that. That's the way the world was. We had to live with it, find some way to deal with it. Well, when I hear people talk about racial animus today, that you're triggered on a college campus and you need a safe space, and clearly racism is not our number one. It's not even in the top 20 list of problems that black people face.
That's true. But what I want you to say, because I think this is so important for people to hear, is why you push so hard, why you speak, why you write, why you do these films, to understand, to explain to people what is really needed to move things forward. And people get caught up in the race of it and saying and fabricating racism or making stories bigger than they are. So why you went from where you were, fighting in CORE and reaching out to try to solve the problem on the left and moving to the other side. I know you can do it more eloquently, but I would think it's as simple as what they were doing wasn't working. Can you explain why what they're trying to do today is not working?
Well, I think, again, you're talking about the sort of younger generation of blacks and how they move,
and the white liberals today. Exactly.
Yes. Well, we're on the wrong page, to put it very simply. We still think our big problem, our enemy, is racism. And so we're fighting racism. But it's like, history is sort of knock, knock. Racism is not really the problem anymore. The problem is, anybody can see. The problem is that a group comes out of 4 centuries of oppression. Their problem is going to be underdevelopment. Oppression, that's what it was. It prevented us from developing, from having the same sort of skill levels, the same cultural values that fit you into the modern world successfully. All those are things we have to join America. The time for us to be hating America and calling it names and so forth and so on all the time, you can do that. America is so big and so wealthy, they'll tolerate that and watch us languish, if that's what we want. My sense is we need to stop worrying about that. Push that, let that just be where it is, which isn't very much anymore. And focus instead on our development, on how are we going to become competitive in this highly technological, highly sophisticated society, the most sophisticated in the world. And we're not able to fully join it because of the problem of underdevelopment. You see groups coming to America who take on the problem of development within one generation. They are in the American mainstream.
Yep.
We keep languishing outside that mainstream.
To a hard break, we can finish that on the other side, which
listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560 The Answer with your host,
and writer of the documentary What Killed Michael Brown. I want to move to your recent article in the Wall Street Journal, The Inauthenticity Behind Black Lives Matter, insisting on the prevalence of systemic racism is a way of defending a victim-focused racial identity. But first, please tell the listeners how they can find your film.
The film is available at whatkilledmichaelbrown.com, and it is also streamed on Amazon.
Finally.
Yes, finally, after a little ruckus there.
Yeah, for those who don't know, they were all set to go on Amazon, and it was supposed to launch. They did everything they were supposed to do, and they decided, you know what, we're not going to stream your film.
Yeah.
And after backlash, they changed that.
Well, it helped us get a little publicity we might not have otherwise got. So
that's true, but it's unfortunate that some company has that much power and they use it in that way.
Right.
Because the film is not a partisan film, so that's important to note, too.
That's right. No, it's not. It tries to look at things from a cultural angle.
Yeah. And speaking of that, your article, you say that many people use identity as a mask. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, what, in the sense that you use your, let me back up for a minute and start where I think it begins. Particularly now, I think this relates to the younger generation, though actually also to all of us. But the problem that we really have today as Black Americans, if you look at our history, is that quite suddenly we have won enormous strides. We have freedom today. I can testify to that. Given my age, I know what it was like before. Your life today, if you're born in America and you're Black, is not going to be stunted by racial persecution. You are free for the very first time, and we're free to build the kind of life you want to build, and to be a full-fledged America, a part of all of our institutions in our society, and so forth. That when you have a victim-focused identity, which we have had for political reasons. We claim victimization so we can win all sorts of entitlements in the larger society. When you have a victim-focused identity, you are thinking of your fate, of your situation, as a victim, rather than as a free man or woman. And so there is a disjunction there. You're free, but you're wearing the mask of a victim, so that you can then get pressed to society, the larger society, for all sorts of entitlements and which they of course happily provide. So they in a sense then reward us for thinking of ourselves as victims. As victims, we get something from America. If we say we're not victims anymore, we feel inside ourselves that it's over with, that we won't be able to get ahead. So our very identity today keeps us dependent on the larger society, keeps us in need of the larger society. And so you see Black Lives Matter and groups like that, trying, again, casting themselves as victims, looking for power as victims, but then neglecting the fact that they're already free. And that the things that they're asking for are things that they could build themselves if they would only understand that the power is in their own hands. And that, in a sense, it seems to me, is where we have to be much more open. We should be demonstrating in the streets, celebrating freedom, not constant look any hint of racism, and we fly to it. We love to see racism because it gives us a sense we have some power in the society. Without racism, we feel impotent.
Right.
We feel lost. And so it is our biggest problem. It causes all the other problems. We have the biggest struggle Black America now has is within itself.
Yeah.
We have to pull back our expectations of the white world to fix us. They're not ever going to fix us.
Nor should we expect
maybe
them
they
to.
should, maybe they shouldn't, but they won't.
That's true. And when we come back, I want to talk about solutions and what we should be doing and how we approach this, because obviously this isn't working. And as long as they focus on race, they won't get to the root of the problem. More with Shelby Steele. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer. And when we left, Shelby was talking about how blacks are too focused on race and therefore aren't focused on the things that they can take control over. And in the article in the Wall Street Journal, you say that after what you call the Great Confession of the Civil Rights Act, that blacks and whites each chose a path forward. Now, blacks, as you say, are too race focused, but whites play a part as well. The white guilt, as you write about even in your book, created a situation where blacks could use the past as a weapon and in some cases a way to make money. Could you talk about that?
Yes. I think the most underrated social force in the world right now, I mean, and literally including Europe and as well as America and then the third world, is white guilt. You cannot, as in the case of America, for 4 centuries, oppress a people. I mean, we all know the details. I don't need to go into them. It was arguably the worst instance of human evil and oppression ever in the world. And you then in the 1964 in America, you pass a civil rights bill that says discrimination against people on the basis of color is against the law. It's against the Constitution. It's illegal. It's an evil. And so you make it clear that America, throughout its existence, even given its magnificent Constitution, that it was in collusion with evil in what it did to black people. Woo! That's heavy. That's a burden of guilt that is simply monstrous. It is going to become, as it has, a force in American life. That guilt is so relentless that whites born into America, no matter when, are going to live under the accusation that they're racist. And their moral authority is going to be compromised by that. Well, that again is what has become white guilt. Has become also black power. The guilt that whites feel, their need to establish and prove that they are innocent of racism, that we're no longer a racist society, that we moved ahead, that we've changed. That is their burden. You know, one of the ironies of all this is then they start to give us programs, give minorities programs that make them dependent on white guilt. So then blacks begin to feel that, well, my way ahead is to keep manipulating white guilt, because they'll give us another social program. They'll give us another a little more affirmative action, some racial preference. They'll give us things that we need to get ahead. Well, that's the symbiosis between the two races that leads to so many corruptions, and keeps us our racial lives in turmoil. We don't get settled. We don't get clear. And the fact of the matter is that whites have made enormous progress on this. Mm-hmm. Today, and I can testify to this as a black who grew up in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, when whites didn't feel a bit of guilt. There was no white guilt. They thought racism was good manners. Right. Well, again, it's the underlying symbiosis that gets, and from the point of view of minorities, it gets us. We're constantly focusing on manipulating white people rather than on getting ahead. Right. For example, the important thing we need to do for the future is celebrate the fact that we are in America, that has so many freedoms and so many opportunities. And we should identify with America, even given its past, because that's where our future really lies, is as Americans. And we keep holding on to race because we think that that's going to give us something. Well, it never did, and it never will. We need to learn, as minorities, we need to accept that, learn that lesson. It won't. We have to identify with the United States of America, its value systems, its constitution, its way of life, its cultural norms, so forth. We are Americans, and we should celebrate that. Then we're in the game. Then we have a chance to move ahead, to really develop. If we keep thinking race is our problem, then we're fighting an old enemy. That old enemy of white racism that doesn't amount to very much anymore. Right. Is it gone completely? No, but it doesn't amount to very much.
Right, and it's like they kind of want it both ways. They want to succeed within the system, but then they say the system's against them and want to be separate from the system. So there's no way you're going to perform at a level of others if you think that you need to do it independently. You want to be separate. Next, we finish our conversation with Shelby Steele, author, writer, and documentarian. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back to the show. This is our final segment with Shelby Steele, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and writer of the documentary What Killed Michael Brown. So, Shelby, we've been going in the wrong direction for years, and I argue that society has allowed this to go on too long. And so now we're in a situation, whatever your views of affirmative action are, that we move past the point of trying to make corrective moves to make equal opportunity available for everyone to preferential treatment. So, as I say, replace racism or perceived racism with racism. And we see it every day, like arguing companies have to have a certain number of black or female CEOs, the new parameters around nominating films for best picture and things of that nature. I am truly concerned about where this is going to go, and more so when we lose the people who have direct experience with it, like yourself. We're going to be left with these people who are making it up. Everything is racist, but they have nothing tied to it. And I don't know what we do and how we solve that. What are your thoughts?
Well, one thing is, I'm old enough to have some perspective. If you keep on that way, you're going to continue to fail. I've been hearing that now for way over 60 years, that if we can just get the whites to do this and get them to do that and get affirmative action and get diversity programs, they all fail. They always fail. We, of all people in the world, we are the ones who should know most of all that race is always a means to power. It is always a corruption. It's never, ever anything else. And so if for people who've been victimized by race for centuries to turn around and try to use race as a way to get ahead is only to compound an unimaginable tragedy. We have got to stop it. Race is what they use to enslave us. Now we're using it to enslave ourselves. We need a bigger identity than a black identity. Mm-hmm. This is not to say you reject black culture and who you are and all of that. I love it. I've taught it for 50 years. But that was imposed on us by segregation. We now have the challenge of moving into the larger world. And we're going to have to move into the larger world as individuals.
Right. Well, I got
as
about
individuals. The group. No. That won't do it. You have to become competitive as an individual. I say to young blacks today, you want to be black, you want to be down. Then let me see you be an individual. What's your grade point average? How are you developing yourself?
Right. Right. And in the last minute here, I want to say, like you talked about, you had that experience, and I'm concerned about that. And obviously this week we lost a giant in the passing of Walter Williams. And,
yes, we did.
Can you just briefly talk about his contributions? Because he really cared about the future of blacks, but he did it from a logical perspective.
Yes, he was. Walter was truly, he just had a great mind for logic, and he applied it. And the thing that I learned from him, and he was a friend, and we'd known each other for many years. And Walter was his own man. He was an individual, so he thought carefully and with real rigor and discipline about issues, and certainly about economics, but larger issues as well, politics, culture, and so forth. And so I always wanted to know what he thought about things because, again, it came from an individual who confronted a problem and honestly struggled with it and came to very original conclusions about it. We lost a great man there.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a phenomenal hour. Shelby Steele, you've been great. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. Good luck with your program.
I appreciate it. Talk to you all again next week.